My name is Yusuf. I'm the president of the Muslim Student Association.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. I've also been a student in 3 classes with Dr. Kirsch. So as a political science student, senior political science student, I'm actually honored to be here. And my questions are along the lines with respect to your film. I've watched it, I've read parts of your book, and some of my concerns are, and in hopes of being a student and in looking into understanding a little more, I'm questioning a couple of things. What gives you or this university or any other university the right to claim who is an authority on Islam? And I ask this, and I ask other questions after this for 2 reasons. You've made a lot of historical inaccuracies in your film. For instance, you said that Islam came out of Yemen, out of 7th century Yemen. Historically incorrect. Islam came out of what's considered to be the Hijaz region, Mecca, Medina. Muhammad came from Mecca, which is not at all where Yemen is. You said in your book, learning to live with offense is the price of living in a diverse society. I, as an African American, believe that's completely untrue. Living with offense day in and day out, it is not a part of living in a diverse society. You cannot be able to withstand offense. If that were the case, the civil rights movement would have not happened. Living in offense is not a part of understanding or having debate. And then it goes to the third question that I'd like to ask, and the question is about debate and having open discourse. I think that before one can be claimed to be an authority on any issue, there needs to be open debate. Yet in the movie, I think, and even in this viewing of the movie, large portions were cut out of the view. Large perspectives were cut out from even having to be questioned. We discussed, is Islam okay for democracy? Yes, Islam and democracy can survive together, and the issues to which you say that they can't survive together are based upon, again, tribalism or even cultures. But that is not the problem with Islam. There isn't the problem with Islam. The problem is with individuals. Again, small percentages of people to whom have spoke out against or have been problems for Islam. So I guess I beg to question, is there a problem with Islam or is there a problem with Muslims? And I guess to close this question, is the problem with Muslims versus Islam, if we really look into the situation of post-colonial responses to situations that are going throughout the world, I think we can see that these similar things happen with respect to raping and killing of women and other groups. We can look at this, for instance, in the Rwanda crisis or in other parts of the world. I argue that this is not the problem with Islam. This is the problem with post-colonial responses and the questions to how do we then establish democracy for ourselves, or how do we establish any form of governance. And I think that's been lacking from your discussion.
Yusuf gets 1 question for each class he took with me. That's why there's multiple.
Well, he actually has never taken the class with me, so I guess I'll just, leave it at that. But Yusuf, you've said a lot in that very eloquent, more than 60 seconds statement. So I'm not, I don't know, I could address everything, which is not to say I know the answer to everything, but I could certainly address everything that you've said, and for the sake of, the audience's sanity, I won't. What I will tell you I'll do is happy to have a conversation with you and anybody else afterwards. But tell me, I'm going to leave it up to you, tell me what is the one point out of everything that you've said that you would like me to engage with you on from the stage?
Okay, so I'll accept the discussion afterwards. I actually meant to ask for that, but I forgot. But actually, I would like to discuss the issue on what do you feel, and again, why do others feel that you are considered to be an authority? I mean, he opened the discussion by saying she is a world's leading expert. In order to be an expert, you have to have an educational background in this. You're a journalist, and you have a lot of credence in journalism, and I respect you in that. But you're not an Islamic scholar, and I would argue that because of that, or you're not even a religion scholar, because of this, you can't have the credibility to be deemed by others who are also less qualified to be a scholar or an expert in the field.
Very good. Well, I guess, first of all, I certainly don't call myself a scholar of Islam. I don't think John was doing that either. What he was pointing out, and this could be up for debate as well, is that in my many years of covering Muslim affairs, Muslim communities, and activities in the Muslim world, not just here in the West, that I've seen things, again, on the ground, that don't always match with the theories that people who call themselves scholars and who are accepted as such like to talk about. So I would ask you to keep an open mind about why it's so important to ensure that when we discuss what's going on, that we pay attention to reality and not just what is in highfalutin books. That's number one. Number two is that, speaking of highfalutin books, let's go back to the Quran for just a second. You know, wherever it is that you open it up, you're never far from three key messages. The first is that only God knows fully the truth of anything. The second is that, therefore, only God can punish disbelief or can reward belief, which makes sense considering that only God knows what true belief and disbelief are. And finally, as a result of those two messages, there is a third very profound message in the Quran, in the same strain of thinking, which is that we as human beings cannot claim to know it all. And therefore, while we are here on this earth, we must be open to freedom of conscience and freedom of exploration. And not just for ourselves, but for everybody. Why? Because only God knows fully the truth, which is therefore an act of faith to be willing to engage in debate. It is an act of faith in the higher authority and an act of humility about ourselves. Now, finally, I will say, it is precisely because I don't call myself a scholar, but that I value scholarship, that this afternoon, for all of you, I have brought with me a copy of a scholarly paper entitled Innovation and Creativity in Islam. And it's put out by an institution called the Nawawi Foundation, which engages many bona fide scholars, i.e. people with PhDs after their names. And this particular paper, which is beautifully written, like even a journalist can understand it, okay? And I'm not being sarcastic when I say that. This is why I chose to bring it. This particular paper points out that the tradition of ijtihad, Islam's tradition of critical thinking, is not just a right, it is a responsibility for all Muslims. It actually states, Yusuf, that it would be a mistake, as it has been for hundreds of years, to restrict ijtihad only to elites and to theologians and to people who are traditionally defined as scholars. It makes the case for why, even in Islamic history, people like you and me, you as a student, me as a journalist, have been bound by the tradition of ijtihad to think critically. And so before you decide that somebody like me, you know, is not worth listening to simply because I don't have those letters after my name, I ask you to just read this scholarly paper and then on the basis of that, make perhaps a more informed judgment. Because remember, it's not me who has written this. It is somebody with the kind of credentials you would respect. But what he is saying is that you ought to be able to respect people even without those credentials, because Islam asks this of you, not Islam's self-appointed ambassadors. Free copy for anyone who cares to have it on the book signing table right after this event.
Here.